Seated. Today we reach the final Sunday of the church year, known as Christ the King, or Reign of Christ Sunday. This is a very special and unique day that weaves together three important theological strands, which we're going to go into in greater detail through the season of Advent, but I want to introduce it today. So this time of year, our thoughts turn towards preparation for the coming of Christ as baby Jesus and the incarnation. In the coming weeks, we're going to explore the season of Advent in even more depth and complexity. Bernard Clairvaux, a French monk living in the 1100s, believed that Advent is the sacrament of the presence of God in the world. And he writes that there's actually 3 Advents, not just one. The first Advent, of course, is the Nativity, the incarnation of our Lord. The second Advent is the coming of Jesus into our everyday lives, in day-to-day situations that we all face. And in these encounters, we have the opportunity to recognize the face of Christ in our neighbors and in our enemies, in the plight of the homeless, the addicted, the poor, the abused. And then the third Advent is the return of Christ at the end of time, the day of universal judgment. And you'll recall, all month long, our scriptures have been growing more and more apocalyptic. Prophets have been warning people that they've strayed from the path. Our gospel texts remind us that time is short. We must be ready. We must prepare ourselves. And on this final day of the church year, Christ the King, all these theological strands coalesce into one monumental description of Judgment Day. And this dramatic event brings our study of Matthew's Gospel to a close. Judgment Day. 2 simple words charged with meaning. Sometimes, I submit to you, it's also charged with emotional baggage and fear. Movies, pop culture, fire and brimstone preachers give us a whole host of ideas about what Judgment Day will look like. And a lot of it is based on misinformed and erroneous theologies. In many cases, these get weaponized, and they're used to exclude and marginalize whole groups of people. For those of us who have been on the receiving end of some of those tactics, the term Judgment Day itself can be triggering. And if that is the case for you, take a deep breath. You are in a safe place. Today, we're going to hear about Judgment Day from the source in both Testaments. And when we actually dig into what those passages say, we're going to find that Judgment Day might look a little different than some people imagine. So let's start with the Old Testament passage in Ezekiel. The prophet is calling out the leaders of Israel for their sinful behavior. What are they doing that is so wrong in the eyes of God? The leaders who are meant to care for the people are selfishly enriching themselves while the people go without. So let's read the little bit just prior to our passage, beginning in chapter 34, verse 2. Thus says the Lord God, Ah, you shepherds of Israel who have been feeding yourselves Should not the shepherds feed the sheep? You eat the fat. You clothe yourselves with wool. You slaughter the fatted calves, but you do not feed the sheep. You have not strengthened the weak. You have not healed the sick. You have not bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strayed. You have not sought the lost, but with force and harshness you ruled them. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd. Verse 6, the Lord goes on, my sheep were scattered all over the face of the earth with no one to search or seek for them. Then we come to our passage, beginning verse 11. Thus says the Lord God, I myself will search for my sheep, and I will seek them out. I will rescue them from all the places to which they have been scattered. It's a love letter. I will feed them with good pasture. I myself will be the shepherd of my sheep. I will seek the lost. I will bring back the strayed. I will bind up the injured, and I will strengthen the weak. But the fat and the strong I will destroy. The fat and the strong I will destroy. God's judgment is directed at those who benefit at the expense of others, to those who abuse and oppress, to those who take only for themselves. These are the sinful actions. Meanwhile, God personally cares for the lost, the strayed, the injured, and the weak. Again, he goes on, because you pushed and butted all the weak animals with your horns until you scattered them far and wide. God says, I will save my flock, and they will no longer be ravaged. That sounds a little bit different than the way I heard it long ago. In Matthew's description of Judgment Day, Jesus says much the same thing. Jesus comes, he sits on the throne of his glory. Verse 32, all nations will be gathered, and he will separate people from one another as a shepherd separates sheep from the goats. Who inherits God's kingdom? Jesus says, I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked, you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. And then the other side, you who are accursed. You gave me no food. You gave me nothing to drink. You did not welcome me. You did not give me clothing. You didn't visit me. The criteria, people, is clear. Either you love your neighbor or you don't. We either care for those around us or we don't. We reach out to the vulnerable in our midst or we don't. Jesus says, truly I tell you, just as you did it to the least of these, members of my family, you did it to me. All month long, our scriptures at the end of Matthew have been calling us to step up and step into our role as Jesus' followers. And today we see the ultimate culmination of that call. When we truly follow Jesus and put his teachings into practice, our hearts are full of love, overflowing. We respond by loving our neighbors around us. We understand and we see God's image in all people. So to belittle or to marginalize or to malign someone else is to insult their Creator. So as we celebrate Christ the King Sunday and look ahead to the new season, the three intertwined advents of Christ give us a new framework for how we might rethink some of these concepts about judgment and justice. In our modern Western consumer culture, it's easy for us to lose sight sometimes that we are by far wealthier than most of the people in the entire world. There is a website called Giving What We Can that it compares global income in countries all over the world. And they posit that the median worldwide income of all the people on the planet is $2,800 a year. Think about that. $2,800 a year. So this season, may we have a renewed awareness of the big picture and of our place in it. May we take this opportunity to recognize all three Advents, seeing Christ in every person, living as lean sheep, sharing what we have, caring for others as well as ourselves.